Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Take This Talks Dev Days. I am Eve Crevoshay, the Executive Director of Take This, and I have with me today Jean Leggett, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I am delighted.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover in terms of kind of the employment landscape and experience. And I've got some questions prepared, and I think that there's going to be some stuff to add to that conversation as we go. But I think I want to start by having you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and what you do now.
Absolutely. I love getting the chance to introduce myself. And I think given today's topic of careers, I want to share how unorthodox my career path has been all of this time. I graduated with an English degree back in 2001. And what do you do with an English degree? And so I went off and I worked in an office and I became like an executive assistant. And that was the thing that I did. And then I followed my husband to go and work in the States. So he was working in the States and I couldn't do anything. And I knew that I had a passion for stand-up comedy. So a little bit of stand-up comedy. I also learned how to become a professional coach, which just means that I'm really fantastic at listening to people and finding their inner sparkle. You know how sometimes you've had that gift your entire life? That's my gift. All right, follow me. And after a near-death experience with my husband in Texas while we were living there, we decided to come home and he wanted to pursue making a game studio. And I thought, that's great. I'm going to do stand-up comedy. And I'm also going to do some laughter and joy workshops. So actually became a laughter yoga instructor at one point, which, every time I think about teaching those classes, it just brings me joy to think about those classes because laughter is just really a very powerful tool to shake up the cobwebs in your brain. And then as he was starting up his studio, One More Story Games, I thought, you're a really fantastic hacker. I'm a really good hustler. So what if I took over the admin stuff? What if I took over being like the face of the company and talk to people? And so we started up our studio. It'll be 8 years next month is the official incorporation of the studio. And we've had a lot of ups and downs. Like we've made a technology. We now have to remake the technology because 8 years ago, it's like it's ancient now.
Yeah.
We've made games. We've shelved games. We've hired great people. We've hired people that I didn't know how to lead. So I've made mistakes. And I talk about that in my podcast. I've also had people, cause us harm, so we've had a lot of ups and downs over the 8 years of being an indie game studio. And so that sort of like gives you a little bit of the background.
Yeah.
But the two worlds collided about 2.5 years ago. Poor Asa has no idea that he's not muted.
No, he doesn't. Here, let me see. Oh, wait, I think I can. Oh, I can do it.
Can you mute him? Ta-da! So 2.5 years ago, the two worlds collided. And the reason why I wanted to just briefly touch on this is there's a lot of things we don't talk about in games. We don't talk about how hard things are.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about isolationism. We don't talk about things that make us feel ashamed. And so I try to dive into that a lot on the podcast because I feel like if we can talk about things from a place of like, here's what happened to me and here's how I got through it, then other people realize that they're not alone, which I know is a really big piece of your organization, like the good mental health practices and all of that. But we were homeless 2.5 years ago. Homeless in a city that we didn't love, and we ran out of money, and it was just like, okay, what next? We just threw everything into storage and went on a road trip. And from that came my request on Twitter to say, hey, I really need help financially. I can't tell you why, but hey, did you know that I'm a coach and I'll trade my time for coaching? And so I didn't realize that I could coach within the game space. I'd kept them very separate. because I had been this joy and laughter coach. I didn't see how that would fit into games. And so since 2.5 years ago, since that one tweet, I have worked with well over 400 people. I think it's actually closer to 500 people in a mentor, coach, random consultant capacity. And for whoever is watching this and listening to this, know that the stand-up comic with the English degree who was good at being an office queen who then later got into coaching, like all of that over 25 years has culminated into the work that I absolutely 100% love to do every single day now.
It's really amazing. You know, I think there's a whole conversation here about you and I are of similar ages. We're almost exactly the same age. Of coming into your 40s and finding kind of who you are, settling into that, and finding a mission and landing, right,
Yeah.
professionally. I feel like there was in my work life almost 2 decades of really kind of a little bit running in circles, a little bit kind of throwing a bunch of things at the wall and seeing what worked, and not really feeling like I understood where I was going, but that where I have been has brought me here.
Yes.
Really like.
Yes. And, I have clients that so now I primarily do, I'd say 95% of my time is career coaching with game devs. And I came up with a framework. We're going to talk about the framework in a little bit. But I work with people who are like second, third year in university, all the way up to people who have 20 plus years experience in the industry. What they want from me are very different things.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed that somebody who's under 25, 28 is this intense feeling that they have to have it all figured out by the time they are 30. And it's like, when I was 26, I just finished university because I was so curious. I wanted to take everything because I hadn't found the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't really create a lot of curiosity space because capitalism, like get out there, pay your bills, especially for all of my lovely people who are in the United States, like your healthcare is tied to your work, go get your healthcare. And whereas we have a little bit more flexibility in Commonwealth countries, it's like, no, you could go work at a low wage job and figure yourself out, and you don't have to worry about your healthcare. So there's a bigger conversation about the privilege and the luxury of finding yourself, which is tied to economics and class and education and socioeconomic background. I did not have what I would consider professional models for careers in my childhood. That was not something that I saw on a day-to-day basis or had an awareness of. It never occurred to me in 1985 when I first got my NES that I could make video games. I just went, that's a video game. Okay. It didn't occur to me there was an artist, a programmer, a musician, but now the world is shaped differently.
Yes.
And so you
the
have
world
to
is
spend that time.
We are also shaped differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people who are coming into their teens now, hopefully, especially the femme presenting ones, feel like they have more options than nurse, secretary, teacher, which is kind of what I felt like my options were even just 25 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, I have a 10-year-old daughter, right? And she wants to be either a writer, because she is already a writer, or a paleontologist, or maybe a geologist. She's not sure, but she likes the
there's two things that I wanted to be, but I didn't know like how I would become those things. And it's so fitting. So one is a therapist. So that has always been something that has been dear to me because I was the person that everybody went to with their problems. And then the second thing is I always wanted to own a bed and breakfast, like a cafe. Yeah. And I want to just share this little story. So if you're listening to this and you're wondering, how do I get clarity about what it is that I should do with my life? Because that's like the big question. Some of you watching, you may be like, oh, I definitely want to work in games. Jean's going to talk about working games. Yes, I will get to that, I promise. But if you want clarity, there are colleges and universities that will do like not a personality, but like a careers assessment test.
Yes. Yeah.
And do you remember those things?
I never took one, but I've seen them before. Yeah. Yeah.
So mine said I would make a great technical writer, social worker, lawyer, or school administrator,
That's like,
or a corporate trainer. I know, but that test was devised 30 years ago. And what it was hitting on were my values of equity and justice, communications, and orderliness. And like, so all of the components of my personality and my values are in those roles.
yes.
And I just made it into like a super hybrid role.
Yeah.
So there are some fantastic books out there, like What Color is Your Parachute?
Mhm.
That continues to be a really great one. So yeah, I think thinking about what is the thing that sparks your joy has to be our number one priority,
Yeah.
as life is very short.
It's short, and there's a lot of things about living in a capitalist system that can really just kind of beat you down, right? Like just that wear you down, and um I think about this a lot, are we do you want to live inside the system or outside it? But in either way, you need to function, and you need to find a way to thrive. And
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
the um it can take a while to figure that out, right? You're not going to figure that out. You're not going to find that balance right away. It takes
Yeah.
some maturity. It takes a lot of self-knowledge.
One
Uh,
of the reasons why I keep talking about the salary increases that I've seen my clients get is
mhm.
because it's really important for me to for people to understand there is money out there. There are deep pockets out there. And as somebody who grew up poor, I had a
Mm,
very like my idea of wealth was like a small box. And then when I went into the workforce, it moved a little bit, and now it's moved a lot. And as somebody who is seeing the kinds of money that people are getting by by doing the dance, by
yep.
doing the career dance, it's like salaries are going up and people don't realize it. And I want to say, listen, that salary that you think is great is actually still half of what you're worth.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can't conceive of like we're tying our worth to our salary, and those are two different things. So I'm helping people redistribute the wealth.
Excellent. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So have you seen that wage growth really through the pandemic? Has that been the thing that drives it?
I remember at the start of the pandemic, me personally, everything stopped. So, as a professional international speaker,
Yeah.
everything stopped because people did not know what was about to happen. I saw hiring freezes. They're like,
Yeah,
"Wow,
everybody
like
went, yeah.
how is this going to impact our business?" And so everything stopped. And what I have noticed in the past 6 months, especially,
Okay.
is the stupid amounts of money being thrown at people.
Mm,
Because what is happening is the companies have started to gear up again. All of a sudden, they realize, okay, we now live in a post pandemic world. Work from home has become the norm. How many companies have we seen say we are now going to fully remote,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I I like to always talk about privilege and many different things. There are so many people that do not have the privilege of work from home jobs. That is an issue, and I'm just talking about general population, not just companies that are doing work from home and then we'll have to go back to in person. I'm talking about you can't do your job as a cashier or a nurse remotely from home. Um, so we've seen the shift in
Mhm.
work from home. We've seen the shift from, hey, we're willing to do fully remote, multi-state, multi-country.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been phenomenal. What a blessing for our industry.
Mhm. Yeah.
Also, the downside of that is it becomes more competitive because now they can pick and choose from the very best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you're not working on your craft, just because you have a degree in game design or a master's degree in game design does not mean that you are better qualified than anybody else who is applying. Right? You have to show that you are qualified, and you do that by showing your portfolio and being able to clearly communicate what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the money stuff. So I have seen people who 0 years of experience get a $75,000 job at a AAA. 1 year experience, 75 to 90,000. I've seen people with 3 years of experience currently working QA being offered $90,000 jobs.
Mm.
So, and then like one of my big, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you, client. I got an email from a client who was making $19.50 an hour in Seattle doing QA for 6 years. That is not a livable wage in Seattle.
No,
For those of
not
you
at
who are
all.
watching, Seattle is like you need to be making at least $40 an hour in Seattle to be able to live, be able to pay your bills and all of those things. They emailed me and they're like, your resume got me a $95,000 job.
That's really amazing.
It made me so happy. And so the money is shifting, and they're being more aggressive with hiring. And strategically, you will always make more money if you jump companies every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are other things about staying that can be great, right? But yes, that is why people move from job to job. Now you're talking in US dollars, right?
Yes, always US, yeah.
And are you seeing regional or geographic differences around hiring?
Well, for certainly in the UK, hiring, like the hiring is still going on in the UK. The UK, in my opinion, generally does not pay well. I will tell you, I did meet with the CEO of NetSpeak last week, and they pay handsomely because they are doing well. And it's like, I feel like if you're a company doing well, your people should be doing well.
Well,
that's just me.
Story, but yes.
That's just me.
Yeah.
You know, when we hear the collective stories of these AAA studios like Bungie and Blizzard and the QA people, I know for certain some of the bigger companies in the Seattle area are skirting the minimum wage laws by hiring people to do QA for $13.50 an hour. And it's like, it's not a livable wage.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that that's untrained labor. Playing video games, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah. No, it's really not. It's not. There's no, yeah.
So, yeah. So the UK, Australia pays fair wages, right? Europe pays fair wages, and they have a beautiful vacations. Like we're talking 4 to 8 to 12 months a year of vacation, or 12 weeks a year of vacation. Yeah, right. Yes, that's the job I want. So, I mean, our European counterparts they know that it's like this the 35-hour work week. They get to go on vacation and somebody covers them off. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the philosophy of how workers are treated changes from country to country. And I think that people are
seeing wage growth across
the industry. Yeah. So it's not as excessively as in the US. And I think it's because the US now has to compete with what they call the FANG, but I guess it's called MANG now since that Facebook has changed its name to Meta. So it's like, it's Apple, what is it? Apple, Google,
Twitter.
Twitter's not part of FANG. I can quickly Google it. What is FANG? What is FANG? So it stands for Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. So they are the ones that are driving. So their salaries are bonkers.
Yeah.
Like I know people at Amazon who are making 300 plus, 400 plus. That's like stupid money.
It is stupid money. Yeah. Yeah. So, but it, at least it's driving up salaries in games finally, right? Because they have been notoriously lower than the tech industry broadly. And you highlight that the bottom of that is still relatively low for
The
promotion.
bottom of that can be really low.
Yeah.
I've seen people with 5 years of experience move into lead roles. Like I had a client who I love dearly. Like I love all my clients too much sometimes, too much. And we had done our work, and I used to keep my salary negotiations documentation private to my clients, but I've actually made it available publicly to people
Mm-hmm.
because if they want to use those resources, go ahead. All I did was Google a bunch of things and put it together. Here
Yeah.
you go. And if it can help somebody get an extra couple of $1,000s or even more, I'm happy for them. And I think that client had forgotten about those resources, and they came back and they're like, I'm so excited. I got a new job. I'm super excited about the IP. It's something I've loved all my life. And I'm going to be the lead. And it was a 50% salary increase for them, which is great,
But it was,
except
yeah.
they should have more than doubled.
Yeah.
So they were so underpaid in their previous role and what the market dictates. So that's the other piece that people don't quite understand is why you have to do that salary comparison is you may be very comfortable in job and you may love it, but your company is not paying fair market rates. And at the end of the day, I think that you should look out for yourself before everybody else. And I say that as somebody who never looks after myself. So I'm learning that lesson. I'm starting to take better care of myself though.
Yeah. I mean, I think fundamentally when you look out for yourself, then you have the resources and knowledge that other people can do the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What, aside from wage growth and remote work, are there any other things you're seeing as trends across the industry right now?
I think here's what I think is going to happen in 2022. Based on the number of postings that I've seen recently, I think we're in for a real hiring boom next year. I think people are like, okay, we're getting back to work. We figured out this remote thing. We can expand our teams. I'm seeing a lot more postings. And what I just noticed in the past 2 weeks, a lot more junior postings.
Fascinating.
Which,
that's cool.
hallelujah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Because that is like I said, I work with clients from, I've never worked in the industry before, all the way up to has like 20 plus years of experience. I can help them, the starting ones, get a really great resume. But what I can't help with is if they are always going to be blocked by somebody else with 2 to 3 years of experience competing for the same job.
Yeah,
I can't fix that. I can't fix your lack of experience.
Yeah.
And so I am seeing more associate roles popping up for design and production and programming. I have worked with a number of clients who we've been able to use industry language to be able to transfer. They're very eclectic. Like I had a guy who used to be a theater lighting manager.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get into production. Somebody who used to be in politics is now in PR and comms. So, I think it's gonna be a banner year next year for hiring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the industry has had a very good pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
Because games were a refuge. And so it makes a lot of sense that that's where things are.
A lot of sense and a lot of money.
Yep. Yep.
And I played a few games.
I don't know what you're talking about. In terms of, so that's the opportunity side. Like that's what we're really excited about, and that's what the landscape is doing. There's also there's a couple of, I want to ask you about what you're concerned about or what kind of warning signs are. But one of the other things I want to ask you about is we're seeing with we're starting to really face the harassment thing in games and gender-based harm. And so we have the Activision and Blizzard lawsuit and settlement, and we have the Ubisoft action. And then there's been what's interesting about that is that there's been collective action and pressure being put on these companies. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. And because I see this, I see it as a, there's been a brewing conversation about unionization in the industry for a while, but this is not necessarily that. It's just like, hey, we are as a group stronger than as individuals. And I'm curious.
Yeah.
It's a complicated one, and one that I walk around.
So I mean, like, I don't represent any company.
No.
I'm sure there are companies that don't like me because I've literally had like a score of their clients moved on to other places.
Oh no!
I took all your people and put them in better places. I think at the end of the day, what I hope is happening is that our collective consciousness around humane work environments, I have always done my best, and I have kept receipts for everything as a business owner, right? Like it's really super important to me that people are paid. Always had like them so I can speak from an indie perspective. As an indie perspective, I think that unions are good. I don't know how that would work for like a team of 2 or 3 or 5, right?
Or even 10. Yeah.
There's a lot that applies and doesn't apply to smaller studios, which there are many more smaller studios than there are larger studios. But when we're talking about big studios, I mean, it's super interesting because I'll have people come to me and they'll say, like, I'm super challenged by this experience that I'm having in HR. And HR was just there for the company. And like, their job is to hire you and to protect the company's human capital. Because in some companies, that's all you are. You're a resource to be allocated on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I like to think that in the nihilism that we have experienced in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, that we're exhausted by this feeling that life is meaningless, and that if we're going to create lives with meaning, that our work has to have some kind of meaning. And that means that our work has to have some kind of compassion and community to it. So I think that the collective feeling is that we want to be inspired and positively led by our leaders in work. And I think what we think is the solution is unions. What I think is the solution is to not let companies be run all by dudes, and not all by white dudes. And somebody heard a podcast where I said that, and they're like, well, I think it's horrible that you give preferential treatment to marginalized people as clients. I'm like, but if that's how companies are, what happens is that these people will leave university, they'll form a company, and then they'll make games, and then they won't think about other people's perspectives, and then their companies get bigger because they had a hit, and then they keep hiring people that look like them and think like them, and then but they haven't done the therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I think
trauma comes from their perspective. We're all living inside this white supremacist world. Whether we do white supremacist things or not, we exist in this space. And that is influencing company culture and patriarchy. I know you were like, I didn't think we were going to get into this, Jean, but like.
Oh, no, I hope we'd get here.
Okay. Will a union fix white supremacy? It has not in the last 100 years.
No, it has protected people. I think here's the thing, I think there are people who are very scared of unionization and even talking about it. And I think it's just, we have to recognize where the impetus comes from. And we also have to recognize what it can do and its limits. Right. But absolutely, a lot of the reason why that impetus exists is because people's at work experience is profoundly dehumanizing and disempowering. And those are real things, and they're not okay.
It's not okay that women make up more than 50% of the world's population, and we are not 50% of the world's leaders. And it isn't because we aren't capable. We've all seen women run circles around some men, and we've all seen some men run circles around some women. Like it isn't that, but like, why is there such a weird tilt? Why do we not have a proportionate number of people who are diverse in diverse roles? We've had massive conversation about racial inequality in the past 2.5 years that has been a continuation of many decades of conversation. We are only just now starting to tip the conversation towards people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a completely deaf household. I have hard of hearing, not enough that I would consider myself disabled, but it impairs my life in many ways. So our companies are not built to be accommodating yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that takes a reckoning.
It does.
And so maybe that comes into a new kind of union. Maybe the new kinds of unions incorporate understanding what equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion looks like. Because right now, I don't think the unions of today can really do what we want them to do.
So when you're helping people look for and identify new opportunities, are there how do you balance the opportunity with the person and their identity and the potential experience they might have in a given environment?
That's super interesting. I don't necessarily help people find jobs. Like I will introduce people to my network. So I'll share with you my process.
Yeah.
Somebody usually comes to me and they say, I have an idea of the field that I'm going into because I'm either in it, I have some experience, or I've trained for it, or I think based on my transferable skills, that would be a fit.
Yeah.
So I do what I call the ABCs of VIP. So I do an assessment. I sit down with them, and for about 30 minutes, I get really deep into them, talk about their values, their past experience, their current experience, and where they think they want to go and how they want to be nurtured. Because for people who are watching this, there is a difference between life at a small studio, a mid studio, a large studio.
Yeah.
And your quality of life is going to be different. Does that mean that there are good people, all good people run all indie studios? No, people who run indie studios are imperfect. Does that mean all large studios are horrible? No. Will you meet awful people? Well, 1 out of every 20 people is a sociopath, and some of those companies have like thousands of people, so you're going to meet at least one sociopath, right? So there's figuring out like what is your work experience culture like? Do you prefer smaller teams?
Mm-hmm.
Is working at a studio that has a project that's in alignment with your personal values important to you? I had a client come to me, 2 offers, mid hundreds, so like 140, 150. One is a game in NFT, like one is an opportunity with a company that's exploring NFTs, and one is not, but some red flags were there for other things. And it's like, NFTs is new discussion.
Yeah.
Do you want to work for a company that does NFTs? Well, if you're a climate change advocate. So there's that piece of it. And then lastly is, why do you think you want to do this role? What's important to you about this role?
Because that will help you articulate what you
Yeah.
what you need out of it from the employer. Yeah.
And when I work with somebody, I usually say, give me your resume, give me your cover letter, your LinkedIn, your portfolio, and give me 5 to 10 jobs you've been eyeing. Because the other piece of what I do, the B part of ABC, is benchmark. So because I've now worked with 400 to 500 people, I have not only have had thousands of hours of intimate conversations with people about their career, which is an absolute privilege to be in that space, but I also understand how people see themselves and perceive themselves at different levels of their career. And almost without hesitation, little hesitation, like 95% of my clients come in and they have no idea where they are in relation to their peers. Because they're dealing with that imposter syndrome.
And what's fascinating to me, what's so interesting is, we have a lot of hangups around talking about how much we make, and companies can try to prevent people from talking about it. Although the state of Massachusetts now prohibits that.
So if you're listening and you're in interviewing for companies in California and Washington State, those are two states that I know absolutely. If they ask you what salary that you were looking for, if a recruiter asks you, just say, I'm happy to talk about that once I know a little bit more about the role. What is the salary range for this role? They
And they're
legally
required
have to tell you.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that be the standard in Colorado. Apparently they have to put the salary on the job posting, which is why certain companies will no longer advertise in Colorado because they don't want to tell how much the role is for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
It's really funny.
It's I really appreciate that my clients have now been emailing me to say, and by the way, I'm making $25,000 more, or I had a client yesterday, 70% pay jump.
Whoa, that's a lot.
I've had a couple of clients that have doubled or quadrupled their salaries after working with me. So I love what I do because I watch them buy a house. How exciting is that?
That's really amazing. That
Right?
will transform everything.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest red flags you see when people are evaluating offers? Like what are what I want, because I get the question a lot from people, what should I be looking for in terms of a good company culture? What are the ways that I can suss that out? Like, what are some of the things that you see that are like, maybe not?
This came up from a couple of clients this week because they asked me, right? They're like, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
One was during the interview for unnamed major company. They said, we are building this. We are flying the plane. We are building the plane as we fly it.
Yeah.
Red flag, right? We are all gas, no brakes.
Oh, yeah. I could see that. Yeah.
Right? And I could see being 22, 25, being like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever.
Right.
Right? When you're over 35, you don't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
Right? You just give me stability. Actually, I tried to steer that client towards the more stable job opportunity because I would want stability over insanity. So watching how they talk about their role and the classic ones, like you could literally Google red flags and jobs and job interviews. And one of them is like, we're a family. Now, I took umbrage to that for the longest time because it's like when we ran our studio and we had employees, we were very collegial. We invited them to all parts of our lives. We treated them like they were equals in the company. And what I noticed was that all went away when our money dried up and then they left. And it was like, oh, I realized that I treated you a certain way and it wasn't reciprocated. So it then made me now share with other indie studios. It's like, listen, I want you to respect your people and you can be connected to people, but accountability is a two-way street. So one, for employers, keep track of every single email, DM, pay stub, everything, because disgruntled people will come back in the future and they will say things about you and you'd be like, no, I got it all. But I also want to say this to the people who are there, right? Keep track of your DMs, your correspondence, and your pay stubs, and hold your employers accountable in a way. Everybody should be doing their part. It's not this. Everybody is responsible for the dynamic, right? No matter big or small. I feel like I went off on a tangent. Other warning signs. This happened recently. I hope nobody's watching that recognizes themselves in this. But they went into an interview, and let's just put it this way. One of the higher ups started trash talking the rest of their team.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh.
Yeah, I also say if it's a panel, what's the composition of the panel? And what's the composition of the staff? And who's speaking and who's not? Yeah. Yeah.
Asking questions like, what do you wish that you knew before you started?
Yeah.
Like, you've been here for 2 years. What are some of the things? What are some of the things that you'd like to change about being here? right? I think the other piece of it is when, let's talk about job privilege, for example, because I know that you wanted to talk about like, what if you're in a bad work situation? So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
multiple situations people come to me in. One is they have a job and they have a degree of feeling about that job. They're okay with it, they're tired of it,
Yeah.
or they absolutely hate it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those will all determine the urgency and their efforts into looking for a new job. One is I have no job and I'm absolutely desperate. Recruiters can smell desperation,
Yeah.
and without us knowing it, the way that we talk about our work, and then like I've had a handful of clients who had no industry experience and they've really struggled getting in, and every rejection is just like it's a chip away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a chip away. It really hurts. And then the last piece is they have no job, but they have a supportive partner. And so they have the luxury or the privilege of being able to take their time with a job hunt. So, in an ideal world, you would be looking for a job when you have a job so
Mm-hmm.
that you can take your time.
Yeah.
If you're in a bad work situation, the last thing that you want to do is take a job at another potentially bad work situation just to leave to the one that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I mean, I had a job situation a while back where I was in it was in a really toxic position. And I knew I had gone on vacation and realized how much of a like physical stress response I had to my work. And I was like,
Mm.
right. And I got back and there was a situation where it was like, if I quit right now, it will save a lot of faces and it will make me happy and all of these things. And I knew I needed to quit, but I also was like so beaten down that I didn't feel like I was going to be an effective interview candidate. I wasn't going to be effective. Like I'd lost so much of my confidence.
Yeah.
And so like and I was in the privileged position of being able to leave without it becoming a financial liability right away. But like, what is that? How do you deal with that? And how do you give people the support to like figure out how to
This is going to be a
remember
hard
their
thing.
value?
This is going to be a hard thing for some people to hear. You may have to find a job outside of games,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even if
right?
it's
This
temporary.
you
Yeah.
are not entitled to work in the field that you have studied, right? I'm sorry. You spent 40, 60, 80, $100,000 on your game design degree and no one's hiring you. I'm really sorry. So that's a whole other conversation about how I feel about the educational system and how sometimes some organizations literally just want bums and seats so that they can get the generation of the tuition, right? Your portfolio is not strong enough. You don't know enough people. Like there are reasons why people aren't getting work. Your degree does not guarantee you that you get to work in your field. So maybe what you have to do is go look for a job that is not the thing that you studied so that you can have stability. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a client that I was working with this past weekend. They've got 3 years of experience in QA. They just landed into a really solid QA role that pays reasonable. But they would really like to pursue a different discipline within games
Mm-hmm.
where they're going to have to spend several hundred hours doing the portfolio development to be able to show that they are a top 3% candidate in that particular area. Some people are not willing to do the work. I think this person is. But in the course of our conversation, I think what he realized was, no, I like this stability thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We lived below the poverty line for the last 12 years by choice as a result of our choosing to go the startup route. Was it 12 years? 9 years. The last 9 years with the startup and when you run your own business and you don't have, 10, $14 million invested into your company, you are scrappy and you maybe don't pay yourself and you go into massive amounts of debt. It's when you start making money, the way that you look at the world changes, the way that you feel about things changes, and you have breathing room. So I would rather see people pursue work outside of games, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just for a couple of years, to have breathing room.
Yeah, I mean the documented the research on the the psychological and physical and relationship effects of poverty and economic instability are really, really profound.
Yeah.
And they persist, and especially if you have kids, that some of that has a potential to become generational, right? And so you, like, the choices that you make around that are really, they have repercussions. And your career as an idea is never more important than your actual, like, real-time well-being, ever.
And this is a big piece of why I have done the work to donate my time to like Code Coven and Pixels and Latinx and games. It's like, please, if you have people that can use my skills, because I do charge a very competitive rate. The way that I approach things is very different from anybody else that is even within the game space. And I've seen the results, in the results, right? 400, 500 clients. I want to make sure that I'm always making space for people who don't have the means to be able to work with me, because I know what happens when I can just help you in that benchmarking piece go, by the way, you're further along than you think you are, or here's where you're at. And if you want to get here, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that perspective, it's really hard to gauge yourself. I was telling you about that person who quadrupled their income. 8 years in games, has an MBA. They put it on my LinkedIn, like, Jean helped me quadruple my income. And a big piece of it was that I'll give you a little bit of a secret as to why what things with me is very different. I don't do chronological resumes. Did you know that?
No.
I threw them out. On a hunch, on intuition. Last year, I was like, what if we did things a little differently? What if, and I came up with an acronym, it's called VIP. And the idea is that the very first pillar is validation. You're a game designer, your validating pillar is design. What are the things you have designed? Ding, 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 ding. Second pillar, implementation. Maybe that's your technical skills. Maybe that's your software proficiencies. Maybe that's how you implement things on a day-to-day basis. Great. Can script, ding, 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 work with GitHub, Jira, whatever. Like, that's what you're putting in that second pillar. That last pillar is your people pillar. So it's your communication, your collaboration, your leadership, your mentorship.
So demonstrable skills.
So that when a hiring manager gets 300 resumes and they stop and they go, oh, they're telling me what they've designed, their technical proficiency, and they've worked with remote team. Thank you. Tick, tick, tick. Goes into the yes pile, right? So it's about shifting the story of how we tell people the story of our career. And that changes. Your story should change as you start to level up in your career. And this is the piece that most people don't know is, when do I start leveling up? By year 3 or 4, I want to see some more strategic language in your resume. You have now got 6,000 to 8,000 hours doing your job. That means I can trust you with something. So I want to see
the thing
ownership.
That I can trust you with.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that first pillar might move, like in marketing. Your first pillar in marketing in year 1 might be marketing. might be, right? And then your second one would be content creation, because that's what you do on a day-to-day basis. That's your technical proficiency. But when you get into year 4, I want to see things like strategy and execution.
Yeah.
When you get into 5, 6, 7, 8, I want to see leadership and strategy.
Yeah.
So but if you don't believe that to be true of yourself, and if you don't walk into the room with what I lovingly call big stick energy, they will not believe it. And when you ask for that money, they will not believe it from you.
Yeah.
So when you look at my LinkedIn testimonials, it isn't that Jean does resumes. It's Jean helped me see myself for all of the skills and talents that I had. And I don't think that's just a Jean thing. I think that's like a really good coach thing. Like that's our job. That's what we're trained to do. And I wish that everybody had that for them. to
Yeah, I mean, I
say,
think
you're
about,
powerful.
I mean, I think, I think about that work experience that I had that was so awful. I probably could have imagined looking for a job if I'd engaged a coach, because I would have been able to reframe the experience that I had. As it stands, what came next was my current job, and I love it, and so I'm glad that I took the path that I did. But that was not a straight line. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
And I did some pro bono work in the meantime that did build my confidence back. That reminded me what I could do. That allowed me
exactly.
because
Exactly.
I didn't know that anymore.
I've had people who worked in games and then left games and then want to come back in. And when I started to conceive of the pillars last year, people were just saying, "Hey, can you help me with my resume?" Like, yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah.
really good with words. I can help tighten this up, use more professional language. I'm a word wizard. That's a gift that I have. And how, so if you're listening to this and you've never heard of me before, go search on Twitter hashtag Jean's job tips. I've literally given so many tips on salary negotiations. There's a sample resume there, there's a sample cover letter there, there's all sorts of stuff. I try not to like spam that hashtag. And the thing is, I started the first chunk of those resumes by saying, okay, so you've got these 5 to 10 job postings. Let's look at the language of these things. Oh, that belongs in your validation pillar. That belongs in your implementation
Mm-hmm.
pillar. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you've done those things. Great. We're just going to put over here and then we're going to rewrite it so that it's very you. Right. So
Right.
We Frankenstein job postings, took your essence and mashed them together and then created a story around that. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know where to start, look at job postings. They're a great way to say, oh, I've done these things. I'm going to include them in my resume.
Cool. Awesome. I just noticed it looks like our screen on Twitch is kind of funky.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Oh, it's back. It's back.
Okay.
Everything's okay.
Hello, Twitch viewers.
No, there's just a few of us here. So I want to make sure that we talked about kind of like salary and employment trends in games, but I feel like um, you're seeing a larger kind of what are you seeing in games broadly? Like what are you said people are hiring, things are growing. I mean we know that already about the industry, but obviously there's things like NFTs and the work in crypto that's really starting to become a serious conversation in games. Some of it in ways that seem legit, and some of them in ways that seem really gimmicky. What are some of the other things that you're seeing?
I am noticing a more mindfulness around hiring diverse.
Great. I mean, it's a start, right? Then there's
It's a
retention.
start. It's a
And
start.
yeah.
I have been the token woman on many a panel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now I try and find people, if it's a topic that I've spoken at length at, and I'm the only one with expertise, I will take the thing. But if it's many other people who have expertise, I'm looking for somebody who is more diverse than my melatonin, like I'm melanin deprived skin. So like, I just want to make sure that we are amplifying the voices that need to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I will see, I don't have empathy for the white dudes. This is very complex. I'm about to say something that's going to get me in trouble, no matter where how I say it. But I think that there are some white dudes that are frustrated by the opportunities that they're not getting. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, too bad. Don't worry. There's lots of opportunities. There's lots of opportunities out there. You will find an opportunity. You are okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
Right now, we know that it's our collective duty to make sure that if we want healthy and thriving communities in our companies, that we need to be looking at candidates that range the entire spectrum of humanity. And so
Yeah, it
that it's
turns
not
out.
just like, yeah.
It turns out we do. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Are there anything specifically from a mental health perspective that you would say, "Huh, this is really interesting or alarming or exciting?"
Well, I do love that there are studios that are being more mindful for inclusion of like menstruation days.
Oh, really? I didn't know that that was
There's a
on the
handful of
table.
studios, yeah, a handful of studios in Australia. Um,
Fascinating. As
yes,
part of, like, a legitimate sick time policy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and parental leave and like watching that the language is not gendered.
Mhm.
So I love that.
Yeah.
I love, was it Square Enix that made the announcement 2 weeks ago that they're going to permanent 4 days a week?
Oh, I didn't see that.
I
That's
think it
great.
was
Yeah,
Square
that's
Enix.
I'm
Yeah.
hearing this a little bit more.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I am hopeful. So now because we're competing with salary,
Mhm.
the next thing that we're going to be competing for is quality of life.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think we might be moving towards a 4-day work week in tech. I don't know. I please,
The one thing the
please.
one thing that I am seeing that concerns me, and I think there's just not a good way to solve for it ever, is that with the increase in geographic distribution and the ease of remote hiring, we're getting more zone differentials, and we're getting
Mm,
companies that are really struggling to balance, and the largest companies are having this also in particular, are struggling to balance work across different time zones on the same team
yeah,
or across
yeah.
teams. And that seems to
I
be like, in terms of work life separation, that seems to be a really hard nut to crack.
I have a client who's in Seattle who has a lot of work that they do with a European team.
Yeah.
And so they're working like 7 to late, 7
Yeah.
a.m. till late. And they're burned out.
Yeah. I don't think, I think in the end, like that kind of, um, like total disregard for time zones is going to
Yeah.
have to be, mitigated
I mean, I
by,
work with clients globally.
yeah.
So what I've done is I've shifted. Some days I start early, but
Yeah.
I do 8 hours. 8 hours is my window.
Yep.
And then some days I start late so that I'm being a little bit more friendly to the
Mhm.
West Coast people.
Right.
So, but yeah, we haven't figured that piece out. And it's super interesting because I put on Twitter that I check my emails Tuesday through Saturday. If you send me an email on Saturday, I'm not getting to it until Tuesday. So it's just not going to happen because my schedule is just so packed. And I think that the immediacy, and you may have seen me retweet this, my own tweet from time to time, my availability online is, or my presence online is not the equivalent of my availability to you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a lot of what, people forget that these things have not been around for very long, and
I
that
only
like
got mine in 2010.
yeah, exactly, and they have shaped our lives. I really think we have completely lost track of how they've shaped our lives and how
Yeah.
profoundly they've changed expectations around availability and access,
I've turned
and
off notifications on everything. I don't.
I have a do not disturb for evenings and weekends, and it
Yep.
has completely changed my relationship to this phone and to my work
Yeah.
because I just don't even see it. Like if I know Have I not need been. to check it, I will. Um, but if I don't see it, I am not prompted, and it's like it's Pavlovian, it's that like. Um, so yeah, I and I see Asa Borderline Entertainment said that needs to be a quote. Yes. Whatever it was about this conversation, yes. The availability online does not, the
Yes.
presence online does
Do
not
not
equal.
confuse my presence online with my availability to you.
Yeah. And I think that's really it's a really good reminder. Both, and I think we think that we should be available.
Yeah.
And that's a myth. That's a myth. And
Well, and like we are all walking suitcases of our own life baggage,
no kidding.
right? My life baggage is I have codependent tendencies. That translates to I caretake for people too much, which means I do things too much for other people, which means I may answer a DM at 12:30 a.m. because I'm on my phone and it's a client. And now I just ignore them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? I just say DMs, I would prefer you to send me an email and I'll answer it during my work days.
Yeah.
And they're very uncomfortable by that. Right? But I think we need to collectively talk about boundaries and respect and accountability. Like there's so much, there's a larger conversation that we have failed to have because everything is going so rapidly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why at Take This, we talk about work-life separation, not balance, because we're not going to have absolute balance. That doesn't exist. There's, there's demands on our time in every direction, but separation where we know that this is a time when I'm working and this is a time when I'm not. And when I'm not, there's a reason why I'm not. And I cannot be expected to show up. And I know that that can't be absolute. It can't be the same hours every time, every day, especially if you have a leadership position or a job with, changeable responsibilities, but some idea about separation and setting bumpers around it. Those are, that's absolutely necessary.
I also think, to come back to our earlier conversation about trends, I think the work from home has shown how well parents and people with chronic illnesses that they need to manage have been able to do their jobs well. And so I think that we do need to create more inclusive and accessible workplaces that are mindful of generations of people's needs. And I don't know about you, but I think that if we were physically able I think if we were physically able, I think a 30-hour work week would be ideal so that we have the means to pay for the things that need to be paid for. House, so shelter, food, student loans. Well, I don't believe there should be student loans in the first place, but healthcare we shouldn't have to worry about those things. But if we could manage to do meaningful work at a reasonable pace, because what is the point of our existence on this planet? It is not to work to buy a thing. It is to experience and to connect. So if we can find companies that have built their culture around people's mission on earth being to have positive experiences and to connect, and if they built their culture from the ground up like that, that would be powerful. Right? Not make a company because NFTs, because shareholder money, because private jets and like champagne on. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the Bobby Koticks. Yes, I'd like to see the Bobby Koticks of the world become more human.
And what's fascinating is we're talking about the game industry, and games are about playfulness and creativity and connection, right? Remembering.
Are they?
I think they really are for most people.
I think that there's two ways you can see it. It's a business with a product.
Oh, well, right. But I mean, the reason people play games, why do people come to games?
Some is joy, some is escapism.
Right. But escapism is not always bad.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm an escapist.
Yeah.
I'm an escapist for sure. My escapee is Netflix. And lately Candy Crush. I got back into it and it's been a real regret of mine last 3 weeks. Take my money, just here you go.
I use I play threes to get into a state of kind of flow. Because I need that, right? I need that break. And I also do lots of other things. I cook, I exercise, I walk. But I think that what I mean to say, and you make a point, this is a business. It's a huge business.
It's a business.
Massive.
I don't want people to think that anything like your employers are running a business.
Yeah, and that's first and foremost. And that, like that is also about work-life separation, is understanding that you aren't joining a family. You don't want to. You shouldn't look for that in your employer. Your employer is employing you to do work for them, unless you're joining a cooperative.
Yeah, you are serving your labor is providing a service, and you are being paid for your labor.
And in
that
fact, it
is
may bring you great joy and satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment and lots of other things. And that's wonderful. But that's not the only thing that's going on.
I also want to say, in addendum to that, is you do not have to be part of an online social community of your industry colleagues to feel fulfilled. There are thousands upon thousands of people who work in the games industry who literally go to work, do their job, punch in, punch out, they go home, and they have lives where they go to softball practice, or they learn how to knit. Maybe they're on TikTok, maybe they're cooking, and they have lives. Your job doesn't have to become your entire identity. And I feel like that is the danger that I've seen in games. Being on social media for the last 5 years, it becomes this all-encompassing thing. And I think that's where a little bit of the entitlement comes in. I deserve a job in games. I need to be,
That's not where I thought where you were going to go with that, because I think that I see that amalgamation of a sense of identity and leisure time with work and work identity as a gamer, especially as a person in games, to be, there's no separation. There's no real clear delineation and space between who I am and what I do, and what I get paid to do.
If your job was taken from you the next day, you are still a value and a valuable and worthy person, period. Period. Right? What you are paid in your work and what you do for work does not determine your value and your worth as a human being.
Yeah. That's really true. And I think, because there's such a culture of fandom and excitement around games, and there's a mystery to being somebody who works in games, like, it's easy to get caught up in that. Yeah. And recognizing the freedom and knowing that you don't have to do this as a job.
Yeah. And I think, like, I have a number of people that I've taken what I call like a prospective client call. They're called prospecting calls, right? That's just sales terminology. So like I have a call with somebody and I'm like, are we a fit? And they'll say, I'm paid really well outside of games and I'd like to take a huge pay cut and come into games. I'm like, okay, so a couple things here. One, are you really up to taking the pay cut? And two, do you really want to see where the sausage is made? Because you may have disillusionment about what it is to work in games. And so I'm very like, I give everybody the unvarnished truth because I want people to make decisions that are truthful as I see them. Right. And that's based on the experience of like 400, 500 people. So like there's an emotional, there is a self-esteem divide between indies and AAAs. Right? The number of indie people who feel inferior because they've never worked for a AAA company.
Oh, really?
Massively. I had a guy, really, really, really lovely client, and he'd made it to the end multiple times for a AAA studio, didn't get hired, and then he finally came to me, and we worked on his resume, and he was getting a lot more interviews, which was great because it's just a numbers game. It's just a numbers game. Everything in life is a numbers game. And he's like, well, now on his resume, it says, I've been a developer for 8+ years on mobile and console. My games have had over 200 million downloads. That's big stick energy.
Right. As opposed to, I've worked on a couple of small games in a small studio.
You should never feel like somebody at AAA is more worthy than you as a developer, simply because they might be working, who knows what they're working on. If they're an artist, maybe they're working on the same rock for 4 years in a game, right? They're just the rock person. There's nothing wrong with being the rock person. But in the meantime, you've worked on 10 different games with 10 different art styles. But you think that you're inferior because you haven't worked on an Ubisoft game or a Bungie game or whatever. It's like our perspective is skewed as to what our value is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jean, I love this conversation. I've had a lot of fun. It's really useful and interesting to hear your perspective and what you've learned over the last few years doing this work and how you arrived there. Is there anything else you want to tell the Take This community about working in games?
If you are wanting to come into games, understand first and foremost, this is a business and there is a product being made. If you are lucky, you will find a team that has a heart that is driven to make heart-centered work. There is nothing wrong with working on a team that is not heart-centered, because I would like you to be mindful that your work is not your worth. And who you are is outside of your job. Make friends outside of your job. If you have been in the industry for a few years, don't be shy about looking around, right? You don't owe your company loyalty. And I say that as a business owner. I say that as somebody who I've had people that I love leave because they've had better opportunities. But the only loyalty that you should have is to you. And that's not to say that you shouldn't think of other people. But we always have to make sure that we put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. So be mindful of companies that do crunch. Thankfully, we're not seeing it as much. I don't think people today quite understand what it was like 20 years ago.
No, I don't think they do.
10 years ago. They don't have an appreciation for the oldie times. And if you don't have somebody who can champion you and lift you up, try and find somebody who can. Go listen to my podcast. It will make you feel better. I'll tell you all about my pain and misery so that you can feel less sad about your own. And thank you very much for letting me be on the show.
My pleasure. And thank you everyone for hanging out today and chatting with us, and look forward to seeing you at Take This Plays next week.